Hello and welcome to another League of Legends tutorial, and another one that concerns every single role, and clearly, that would be vision. Whether or not your teammates ward themselves or even have the minimap activated, the onus is on you to do your best at complementing the map and providing vision that gives you information on which you can act. That can come in the form of protecting yourself against tower dives, giving deep vision so your bot doesn't die to a level 6 Nocturne node, or controlling dragon and baron areas so you can avoid losing that 50-50 smite because pushing buttons is difficult. And a quick mention that we are doing a keyboard, mouse, and mousepad giveaway, and that ends on Sunday, so get all your votes in as soon as you can, and be sure to subscribe to those other YouTubers as well. Naturally, the very first thing I'm going to mention is that vision isn't static, and you should continually be moving it around as the game progresses, particularly in terms of situational wards where you're securing a neutral objective. No matter how hard you try, you'll never be able to convince me or anyone that keeping your control ward on the bottom side tri-bush when you're trying to take Baron is a good use of your vision. So make sure you're continually refreshing those control wards as you move with your team, and if you're the support, using your scanner and your wards to help out with clearing vision and enabling your team to see exactly what's going on. Now, you can't always have a map lit up like Season 3 or if you have a TSM jungler, so we're going to break down a brief example of how dynamic vision can lead to your team getting huge leads over the enemy, and then we're going to analyze the best warding locations on the top half and the bottom half of the map from both red and blue team perspectives in order to give you the best chance of success using vision. So the reason I'm using this example before we get into the meat of the actual locations of the best wards that you can use in solo queue is this example uses multiple facets of vision that completely shuts down an enemy's activity while giving your team an overall lead because of it. So in this situation, I'm on support, I'm playing with a Jinx, we're actually shoving up quite hard against the Kaiser and Taric. That means I can, after an early gank where things didn't go too well, but I got an assist, I can put down a pink ward in that river bush. Now yes, you want to keep your tri-bush behind your water, but if you're shoving, it can be quite useful to deny enemy vision in that bush, as well as, give yourself a bit of added security. Now we're laning for a little bit, and Nidalee ever so briefly shows up in the river. She's obviously taken the scuttle, or she's warding around the area. Immediately we ping and we back up a little bit. We want to show respect to that. You'll notice that my Aurelion Sol's health bars have gone completely down and he's very close to 0. That's because Zed had ulted him and they had a skirmish in the mid lane. And thanks to a green ward placed by the Aurelion Sol in the river, he sees the Nidalee coming up. I click on my minimap to make sure that I can ping the location and keep an eye on the situation. Fortunately, because of the ward and the pings, he's able to back up and get out safely. At this time, my Pantheon is on the top side of the map. So it's at this point, as the bot lane, we know we need to reduce our pressure in the lane. We need to back up a little bit. I'm most likely going to lose that control ward to Taric and Kaiser as they re-push the lane out, and I tell Jinx that Nidalee is going to gank from behind. She's going to maybe take Krugs, leave some wards behind, and she's going to come and try and flank us from that side. So Jinx does a great job of putting a trinket ward in the tri-bush, and guess what? Here comes Nidalee straight from Krugs, tries to get a gank off, but we heads up, we disengage, and nothing comes of it. Now you'll notice at this point, Pantheon is moving back into his red side jungle, and instead of leaving our jungle, Nidalee, who does have a lead in this game, has obviously placed wards down by the Raptor camp, at the very least, because as soon as Pantheon crossed that bush, she started to move into that area. So we ping it out, and I begin to rotate immediately. I want to help if I can. I use my ultimate, Pantheon has to flash to get out, but I'm able to secure the kill, and, well, my jungler lives to fight another day. But guess what? There is also a control ward in that side bush in front of the red, which I then, of course, clear out. So multiple things happened here. I used a control ward on an aggressive lane because we can have that extra coverage and deny the enemy coverage. However, our jungler was the one being invaded, and the Nidalee was applying a lot of pressure in counter jungling and setting up surprise picks. And what you want to do from Nidalee's case there is, of course, leave vision by the Raptors and leave vision by the red so you can set those traps against the Pantheon. Now, because of the fact that we warded very well as a bot lane and we had our lead, that could in turn help our jungler. And now because he survived and managed to get an assist, Nidalee's dead, her vision is gone, she's lost her pressure. Well, Pantheon comes right back and ults down to the bottom lane to say thank you. We pick ourselves up a kill. The flow of events all because of vision. None of this would have happened if we didn't see Nidalee thanks to the 2 wards by Aurelion Sol and myself on the bottom side, and the fact that Jinx then put one on the tri-bush. 3 people contributing to wards to help their jungler out, and in turn he helped the lane. I don't want to hear anything about low MORs not doing this or that. You can still take control of your own vision. Even if Jinx didn't ward, I had my own trinket ward up in that situation and I could have put it down. It was abundantly clear that that was going to happen. So we're going to look at the top side and bottom half of the jungle using my own custom-made graphic, discussing the best wards when the lane is pushing against you, when you're pushing, when it's neutral, when you might use it during invades or defensive situations. Now I just want to mention, as I'm using footage from a variety of sources, sometimes the ward positions in bushes might not be the best, either whether it's for myself because I'm being lazy or the people on my team. The most important thing is, of course, that the wards are placed, but there is a position within each bush that guarantees you maximum vision of the area. You want to try and keep those things to the edge of the bush, not necessarily against the wall, but it doesn't matter as much for some over others. That that's something you want to look into after this video, feel free, I'll put a link in the description, and that'll only add to the knowledge that you get in this video. So with that in mind, we're going to head to the blue side first. I have marked a simple indicator next to each ward letting you know which position, whether it's mid, jungle, support, top, or whatever, might have better access to placing those particular wards, but of course anyone can put them there and it will depend on how your team is warding overall. So it's just a general guide to give you an idea of how you can get the map set up. Firstly, as you are blue side, the Tribush ward is one of the most important sources for vision in the bot lane. It gives you that huge advantage over the enemy in terms of keeping flanking junglers and mid laners at bay, as you just saw, and you should always aim to keep this ward up at all times. And yes, that means keeping 2 control wards in your inventory as much as possible. The enemy bot lane has to venture into your territory, into a choke, in order to remove it. So if the lane is neutral or you have any kind of lead, it can be quite difficult for them to actually contest that ward. Now the next one is of course a standard ward location, especially during laning phase. Both the ADC and the support will need to keep that bush control. So using your trinket wards to keep yourself safe from TPs, from lane ganks, from those thresh hooks if he's just, camping in the bush and you can't see anything. That's important, and you should alternate that together while maintaining river awareness. Now in the third location here in this river bush, it works together with the Tribush ward as well as the mid-river ward, and the whole goal here is to prevent the most basic ganks. But you also have to consider the jungler you are against and the mid laner you're against. If you're hard pushing the lane and have an advantage, you can even slap a control ward in the bush as I just showed you. Keep that Tribush lit up just in case of deep flanks. And yes, ADC mains, that usually means you have to buy a control ward as well. If however the enemy jungler has no dash, for example, and you're pushing up or you're in a neutral lane, taking out that blasting cone can really save you a lot of time, because you can just put a ward further up the river without having to worry too much about the bush, as the jungler has no way to get into that bush without you seeing. However, if you're against a Nocturne or Lee Sin, well, they can easily get into the bush without the blasting cone, so putting a ward over the wall there as well as deep in the river gives you a bit more accessibility of vision in terms of denying their ganks. And that scuttle area, if you have a down or a ward there, is usually very good for monitoring dragon movement and other river movement as well. Now let's extend a little bit out of bot lane here and into the jungle areas. So whether it's a support whose lane has gone back or a jungler who's counter jungling, you can put a ward on the enemy blue buff to keep deep vision of their general movement, or to in fact time a second buff invade, much like the Camille vs Lee Sin example we looked at a few weeks ago. Now usually having a longer heads up to the location lets the counter plays be set up, and mostly being able to back up and avoid ganks, especially if the jungler's coming down that way. So you can also use it to trap the jungler in 2v1 situations, but it is worth noting if you are the jungler, you will often leave a ward because of this at the intersection where all the lanes sort of collide in that blue side jungle, and I'll put a wolf ward there on the screen now. So that's less for setting a trap, but much more for seeing his movement within his own jungle from camp to camp. So if you're trying to time that for further counter jungling or to protect yourself from being collapsed upon, that's an excellent ward. Or simply if you're invading at level 2, you can put it over the other side by the blasting cone just to keep yourself safe, so you can extract yourself from an unfortunate situation should the need arise. So let's look at that bottom side of the mid from the blue team perspective. And besides the standard lane ward for the mid lane, and of course keeping that river bush nicely warded, is the center river bush and the one a little bit to the north. And you can keep control wards in those bushes, and it's imperative that you do, because it stops jungle support rotations if they want to double gank you. It also stops mid lane rotations if they're just trying to simply walk down the river to your bot lane. And if you're pushing mid laner, you might even also place a green ward or pink ward more inside their jungle, which gives you more time to react should the jungler try to punish your aggression. However, if you are the one being pushed in yourself, say against a shove and roam champion like Talon or Aurelion Sol, the entire team technically must work to keep your red side jungle safe, because even though you have that nice Tribush ward from a bot lane perspective, it's very easy for the enemy jungler mid to roam through your own jungle without you seeing it, given the nature of the paths. This means placing a defensive control ward or vision ward outside your red buff is necessary should the game dictate it. Perhaps a secondary ward on the red buff to prevent a steal. And finally, if you are bottom lane and you're being pushed under tower and you're having trouble keeping the Tribush warded, you can keep secondary wards and even a control ward by the Krugs and just over the wall, and that can really help you turn a situation that seems devastating to something perhaps, slightly less devastating, but you might be able to get out or even make a turn. But the point would be that that pathway from mid lane to the bottom lane is fully detectable if you have good cascading vision all the way down as a team. It's also worth noting that the vision around mid lane, if you put a pink ward there defensively outside the red buff and you have the side lane bush in the mid lane warded, a jungler can still sneak in with good vision, like you see with this Trundle example. So having a trinket ward, vision ward, or control ward further upwards can actually help you save yourself a bit more than those two wards can normally. So now let's shift to the red side. Of course, we don't have the luxury of the same map shape and jungle pathways into the river, but let's look at crucial wards that are different from the blue side, because there's some commonality in terms of how the wards are laid in the river, that you share the bushes in that sense, but the jungles are where the pathways are different. So naturally your river wards are standard and they're normal, but you don't have the luxury of having a Tribush that's actively in the way of ganks, but it comes with the safety of the situation given the map shape. That means keeping a control ward in that river bush might be very difficult even if you get pushed back just a little bit. But that being said, you do have a tri-bush, and you can keep a control ward in there that can last a very long time, and that will stop tower dives, mid lane roams, and it can really keep you safer in that sense. Although from a ganking perspective, you do have to be a bit more smart about where exactly you put the control ward, but in general the same bushes all apply as the blue side. So if you are the mid laner being pushed in, you can also keep a vision ward in your own jungle there, or around the blue buff. So if a mid laner does like to push and shove and roam behind your bot lane when you're the red side, you have that cascading vision again to protect them and give you time to react and perhaps deny that 4-man gank. Now dragon vision is slightly less useful from just putting a ward by the scuttle crab, because blue team can jump over this blasting cone and use that to do the dragon, or using a dash and hugging the back of the pit. So you might be better off putting your wards a little closer to the pit, or even in the pit, that can deter any sneaky dragons. Or in moments when you do have downtime as a support, perhaps as a jungler, placing secondary wards by the enemy raptors, the red bush, or simply over the dragon wall can help keep track of any sneaky dragons, as well as jungle pathing down into the bottom lane. Now the jungler in mid can also contribute to these wards around the area, especially when you have stronger lane priority or like to shove, and you can even place a control ward by the enemy red buff, or like with Nidalee even further along with vision wards around the area, and that can give you a lot of dominating vision on the jungle if you wish to collapse, 2v1 him, contest buffs, as well as just prevent any sort of ganks whatsoever. And don't forget that Krug ward I mentioned before, but instead of being a defensive vision ward this time, well, if you can get a nice aggressive ward there when the enemy jungler and enemy bot lane aren't in your way, having a ward by those Krugs can really give you a big heads up into their clearing paths as well as ganking paths. Given that you would have to contest the tri-bush area due to the enemy control wards, it's often common to keep that simply greened up whenever you can, and you can afford to rotate it as a duo in order to clear it out. And if the jungler does come, especially early on when there hasn't been a control ward in that enemy tri-bush, well, he has no idea you've done that, and it's an easy rotation and kill, especially as Tristana and Zyra. Now let's shift to the top side of the map, mid lane, jungle, and top lane. And without really needing to be said, there's a lot in common with the map in that it's identical, except for the fact that you have 3 people instead of 4 people able to get that vision down. So there's less players, but you want to try and keep everything up as much as possible. Top laners have to do what they can in protecting their flanks and abusing their lane position. So from the blue side perspective, top laners have a harder time unless they're lane dominant in keeping that pink ward in the river safe, but usually trying to keep that bush as well as the enemy tri-bush warded are standard, along with paying mind to lane ganks, because if you are being pushed in, it's very easy to be against an aggressive laner, and when you decide to go for the cannon minion to try and sneak some gold, the jungler just comes out and they both 2v1 you engage. So be mindful of those lane wards as well, just like with the bottom lane. Now note, if you are being shoved in though and you have good game sense, you can keep an eye on your jungler and his pings as well as a vision on the enemy jungler, and keeping your own tri-bush warded, especially with a control ward, will give you enough time to set up a defense or pull out of the situation. Unless you are hard winning and you have that 2v1 potential and you're roaming down to get deep wards against the enemy jungler, you will need the mid laner on your team as well as the jungler to help keep all the entrances and pathways to your lane nicely covered. Keeping those standard river and bush wards is imperative for gank prevention, and also of course give a heads up on counter jungling, especially when the enemy jungler decides to walk by a bush without even checking if it's warded. You can ping your mid laner, you can go collapse and get yourself a free kill. Sometimes you might have to yell and chat, but they will react eventually, you hope. But should you be mid or jungle, having that control ward in front of the enemy red buff, even right in front of it, plus supplemental wards at red, at raptors, the space between raptors and the river, will give you total vision domination and not only allow your top laner to stay safe, but also your mid laner. But however, should you be in that losing situation as a mid laner, jungler, or even a team, keeping a ward at the entrances of your own jungle will help keep an eye on any aggressive movements from the enemy team to try and seal your camps or collapse on you, and even go for the tower dive on the top lane. Conversely, as with the bottom lane, being on red side gives you alternate options of tracking the enemy movement while keeping all the standard wards in place. As the top laner, you have priority on keeping your tri-bush control warded, and even move on down into the enemy's blue side jungle and put down a ward that gives your whole team information on where he is. As with bottom lane, you can put a vision ward or a trinket ward over the wall there by the blasting cone to stop you from dash junglers or nocturne junglers and things like that. If you are the jungler doing an invade onto the enemy blue, you will usually leave a ward by that intersection so you can track their full movement across the area to see any incoming trouble. Additionally, you can leave a control ward and vision ward around those entrances, and as usual, keeping up defensive wards against aggressive teams or in losing situations will help you prevent blind invades and keep your farming safe. And if you are mid laner, keeping those flanking junglers at bay is most important. So hopefully that gives you an overview of the strongest places to keep vision depending on the nature of your lanes, whether you want to invade, you're playing safe, you're aggressive. The most crucial thing about wards is placing them when the enemy doesn't know you've done so, because then they don't know that there is wards and they're more likely to walk over it. Don't always just place it right in front of them. Subtle wards that they don't know exist are the best, and that Nidalee example is a great example of how not knowing wards are where they are can lead to a bad play for you because you're just being arrogant about the vision. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and comment if you enjoyed. Think about becoming a member and joining us officially to get access to the perks. Subscribe for more League of Legends guides coming soon. Join us on the Discord, and as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.